I paid for my sister's dream wedding $38,000 of my own money. She took the mic at the reception and said, "Some people give gifts, some people give everything. Thank you, sis." Then she turned, smiled coldly and added, "Especially for giving up on him so easily, while holding hands with the man who ghosted me after I funded his startup." "So, are you really okay with this?" Yasmin asked, tucking a curl behind her ear as she sipped her oat milk latte. We were sitting at a coffee shop in downtown Oakland, the week before her wedding. The sun filtered through the window and made everything look prettier than it should have. I could feel the tight smile on my face, the one I wore for most of that year. "Of course," I said. I even forced a laugh. "I'm fine." And in that moment, I thought I might be able to convince myself it was true. That I really could sit through her wedding, watch her marry the man who disappeared from my life without a word and smile for the photos. I'm 38. My name is Marlena. I work as a systems analyst for a renewable energy company in Oakland. I'm not flashy, but I'm steady. I've worked my way up slowly. I save, I plan, and for most of my adult life, I've carried more than my share of weight. My sister Yasmin is 7 years younger. Our mom died when I was 19 and she was 11. And when someone that close dies, it rearranges everything. My dad fell into his grief and stayed there. So I did what oldest daughters tend to do. I stepped up. I paid for her braces, her school supplies. Later, her cheer uniforms, her college books, and when she studied abroad in Amsterdam for a semester, it was my name on the wire transfers. I didn't think twice about it. She was my sister. She needed me. That was enough. She was always the golden one, warm, effervescent, magnetic. People just fell into her orbit. I was the planner. The fixer. I was the one who remembered birthdays and sent the thank you cards. She was the one who forgot appointments but showed up with confetti and hugs. When I met Rory, it was the first time in years I'd felt like someone really saw me. He worked in sustainability logistics, pitching an app that would make eco-shipping easier for small businesses. We met at a tech mixer. He wasn't the most handsome man in the room, but he was clever, funny, and could quote old sci-fi movies like a second language. We clicked. We dated for 6 months. He met my friends. He met Yasmin. We cooked together, hiked in Marin, talked about maybe taking a trip to Big Sur in the fall. I didn't notice it at first, the way he looked at her during dinner when she dropped by, the longer than necessary glances. I told myself I was imagining it. Why would he do that? Why would she? Then came the investment talk. It wasn't a pitch, not formally. He just started sharing how tight money was getting. How VCs weren't biting. How he was this close to something big but needed a little runway. I was saving for a home. I had over $40,000 in a high-yield account, and he knew that. Bit by bit, I gave him money. First $5,000. Then another $8,000. Then $13,000. I asked once about a contract, and he said, "Of course, let me talk to my lawyer. But you know I'm good for it, right?" And I did. Until he disappeared. One morning I texted him about picking up dinner, and it just didn't deliver. Called him straight to voicemail. Sent an email, bounced back. He vanished. I thought he was hurt. I actually called hospitals. Then I saw he'd removed me from LinkedIn. Yasmin came over the next night. She looked at me with wide, sympathetic eyes, brought cheap wine and takeout, and let me cry for hours. She said she'd seen him in the city once. Briefly. That he looked weird and didn't say much. She shrugged like she couldn't make sense of it either. I believed her. Because she was my sister. Because betrayal wasn't something I ever expected from her. Months went by. I worked. I slept. I tried to pull myself together. And then, out of nowhere, Yasmin invited me to brunch. "I have big news," she said. Her eyes sparkled. I thought she was pregnant. Or maybe she got promoted. Instead, she slid her hand across the table and flashed a diamond ring. I blinked. "You're engaged?" She nodded. "To who?" Her smile faltered. "Someone you know," she said. And then Rory walked in. I couldn't breathe. Not metaphorically, I genuinely felt like my chest collapsed. He strolled in, grinning, one arm already sliding around her waist like it belonged there. "Hey, Marlena," he said, like we were old friends. I excused myself to the bathroom and sat on the toilet lid for 15 minutes, trying not to vomit. Later, she claimed they reconnected totally by chance. That they didn't plan it. That love is complicated. That she didn't know how to tell me sooner. I didn't speak to her for nearly 3 weeks. She called me every few days, left long voicemails, crying sometimes, apologizing others. She never admitted she was wrong. Only that it was messy. Only that she never meant to hurt me. Then came the call about the wedding venue. She'd lost the deposit. The new place near Lake Tahoe was expensive. She was crying again. "I just wanted Mom to be proud of this day," she said. And like the idiot I sometimes still am, I caved. I told myself it wasn't about them, it was about the memory of my mom. About giving my sister something beautiful. I paid for the venue. And the dress. The caterer. The floral arch. The string quartet. The shuttle buses. The photographer who charged per hour and extra for film prints. It totaled just over $38,000. She kept promising she'd pay me back once Rory's company launches. I said sure. But inside, I was just trying to survive the days leading up to that wedding. It was hard. I won't pretend it wasn't. Every fitting, every vendor call, every seating chart I adjusted made my stomach twist. I could barely eat. I couldn't sleep. But I smiled. I gritted my teeth and smiled. Because if nothing else, I knew how to show up. The wedding day arrived. Edgewood Tahoe looked like a dream, glassy lake, golden light, wildflowers in bloom. Yasmin looked radiant. Rory looked smug. I kept my distance. Focused on logistics. Made sure the DJ had the correct playlist, that the favors were placed on each charger plate, that no one spilled wine on the guest book. The reception was beautiful. Toasts began. Her best friend gave a speech. Our dad spoke next, a rare show of emotion that actually made me tear up. Then Yasmin took the mic. She thanked everyone. The venue. The staff. Her new in-laws. Her bridesmaids. And then she looked at me. "Some people give gifts," she said, smiling through tears. "Some people give everything." I felt my throat tighten. "Thank you, sis." I nodded, eyes wet. Then she turned to Rory, grinning. "Especially for giving up on him so easily." A beat of silence. Then whispers. Then laughter. The wrong kind. Rory grabbed her hand and kissed it. Like it was some grand romantic gesture. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly. I didn't say anything. Just turned and walked out. I didn't take the shuttle. I called a car and rode back to the cabin alone. I didn't check my phone that night. Or the next day. I ignored her texts. I ignored the group chat. Because I finally understood something I should have seen years ago: my sister wasn't just careless. She was cruel. And that's when everything started to change. I spent the next morning sitting on the porch of the Airbnb I had rented, looking out over the lake with a mug of coffee that had gone cold before I even drank half of it. My suitcase was still unpacked in the bedroom, the dress I wore to the wedding crumpled in a heap by the door. I hadn't touched my phone. It buzzed a few times, soft pings from people who either didn't know what happened or worse, thought they did. I replayed it all in my head, over and over. The moment her voice changed. The words she chose. The deliberate cruelty of it. It wasn't a slip. It wasn't some flustered mistake in a speech. It was rehearsed. Calculated. And I couldn't stop asking myself why. Why would someone I raised, someone I protected, someone I loved like a second mother, humiliate me in front of 120 people on what should have been her happiest day? The car ride back to Oakland was 5.5 hours of silence and white-knuckled steering. I didn't even turn on the radio. Just drove with the windows cracked and the wind drumming in my ears like static. I kept hoping that I'd start crying, that some pressure valve would release and I'd finally let it all out. But I didn't cry. Not on the drive. Not that night. Not even when I got home and found a thank you note taped to my apartment door in Yasmin's handwriting. It said, "You made this day possible. I know it wasn't easy. But one day you'll understand. Love you always." I tore it in half and dropped it in the trash without reading it again. The next few days were a blur. I went back to work and buried myself in spreadsheets and team meetings. I said I had food poisoning when people asked about the wedding. No one pressed. I started thinking about the money. About how casually I had given it up. I had been so wrapped in guilt and nostalgia and obligation that I forgot it was my life I was sacrificing. Not hers. I checked the wire transfers. $38,721.18 in total. I tried to convince myself it was a sunk cost. That it was just money. But the truth is, it wasn't just about the money. It was about being used. It was about trust being manipulated so deeply, so intimately, that I didn't even notice until the final blow was delivered with a mic in her hand and a smirk on her face. I started seeing a therapist again. Her name is Dr. Flores. She's sharp and soft-spoken and doesn't let me sidestep things. When I told her the story, she just sat with it for a moment. Then she said, "You understand that wasn't about him, right? That was about you finally choosing yourself, and her not being able to handle it." It was the first time someone put it like that. Because maybe that's what it was. Maybe when I stopped saving her, when I grieved the man she wanted for herself and didn't fight, maybe that was the moment she stopped seeing me as useful. And started seeing me as competition. Or worse, a cautionary tale. I never responded to her texts. 2 weeks after the wedding, she sent a long email. Said she wanted to clear the air. Said she was hurt that I left without saying goodbye. That she was disappointed I couldn't be happy for her. She mentioned nothing about the speech. Not one word. That email sat in my inbox for 3 days. I didn't open it again. I just archived it. I started blocking them after that. First her number. Then Rory's, which I hadn't used in nearly a year. Then their Instagram accounts, their emails, everything. I even filtered my Gmail to delete anything from their wedding planner who, for reasons that can only be explained by twisted irony, kept sending post-wedding updates and links to shared photo albums. I moved out of my apartment the next month. Broke my lease early and didn't even mind the penalty. I found a small rental house across the bay in Sausalito, nothing fancy, but quiet. Peaceful. Surrounded by trees and a backyard that gets dappled light in the mornings. I put a small fountain by the patio. I sit there now on weekends, drinking tea and reminding myself what it's like to be still. A few people have asked where Yasmin is. One of my coworkers, Talia, bumped into her at a bar downtown. She said Yasmin looked flushed and tense and was arguing with someone, didn't say who. I didn't ask for details. Because by then, I had already started pulling the thread of everything that led up to that day. The choices I made. The lines I allowed to be crossed. The excuses I made for people who treated me like I was disposable. I thought of every time she cried to me over something small, a late grade, a breakup, a fight with our dad, and how I dropped everything to be there. How I bailed her out of credit card debt in college. How I drove across the state once because her car died on a road trip. How I never once asked for a thank you that wasn't wrapped in guilt. The hardest part wasn't losing my money. It was realizing she never actually saw me. Only what I could give her. And now that I had nothing left to offer, I was nothing to her. I didn't expect the silence to last as long as it did. Yasmin always had a way of finding her way back into my life. No matter how badly we fought, and we did, many times growing up, she'd always come back with a little charm, some soft excuse, or a helpless "I just didn't know how else to say it." And somehow, I'd always find a way to forgive her. But this time, she didn't try again. After the long email and the wedding photo links, there was nothing. No texts. No calls. Not even a birthday message, and she never missed my birthday before. It was like she'd written me off, boxed me up in a file marked inconvenient, and moved on. And that, strangely, made it easier. I began relearning how to fill my time. I started reading again, not just headlines and work emails, but novels. Whole books. I joined a book club at a local bookstore where no one knew my last name or asked about my sister. I went on long walks in the Marin headlands, where the salt air cleared something out of me I didn't realize had been clinging on. I got into birdwatching. That one surprised even me. But there was something calming about standing still and waiting, not expecting anything, just noticing. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting on anyone to call. No one needed me to fix their crisis, co-sign a lease, float them rent, or answer frantic 1 a.m. calls. I was free in a way that felt unfamiliar but good. Work got better, too. I didn't realize how much emotional energy I'd been bleeding into my personal life until I stopped. Suddenly, I had room to breathe. I was sharper. More present. I took on a new project streamlining our team's energy reporting tools, and my manager noticed. There was talk of a promotion, and for once, I felt like I had the capacity to go for it. I won't pretend I didn't think about her. Of course I did. I'd see sisters walking together at the farmer's market, laughing in a way that made something inside me ache. I missed her. Or rather, I missed who I thought she was. The version of her that came crying into my room at 12 because she had a nightmare and didn't want to sleep alone. The one who sent me postcards from every city she visited, even when they were only a few words long. The one who called me my rock in her college graduation speech. I clung to those memories like they were pieces of her I could still salvage. But the truth is, they weren't her. Not anymore. It hit me one evening when I came across an old photo album while organizing my storage bins. There was a picture of us from a trip to Monterey, sitting on a bench by the water, arms around each other, both smiling like we didn't know how much time would change us. And I realized something: that moment had passed. That version of us didn't exist anymore. Maybe it never truly did. The wedding photographer emailed me a month later. Apparently, my name was still attached to the invoice for some of the additional photos and prints. I hadn't paid the last $1,400. He said they were reaching out to both parties but hadn't heard back from Yasmin or Rory. I responded politely. Please forward the remainder to the bride and groom. I am no longer involved. He replied within an hour, understood. Thank you for your help up until this point. I stared at that line for a while. It was simple. Professional. Final. Thank you for your help up until this point. That was the last time I was mentioned in anything related to the wedding. But the universe wasn't quite done testing me. About 3 months after the wedding, I ran into Rory. I was at a local green tech mixer, the same kind of event where I'd first met him talking to someone from a logistics startup about energy rebates. I was mid-sentence when I felt someone step into our circle. Marlena, came a voice I recognized instantly. I turned, and there he was. Rory. Same shaggy hair, same smug confidence. But he looked thinner. Paler. His shirt collar was wrinkled, and his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He acted like nothing was wrong. Like we were old friends who drifted apart but meant to catch up. He asked how I'd been. I gave him a flat, fine, thanks. The man I'd been speaking with gave a space, bless him, and Rory leaned in. Listen, he said, dropping his voice, I didn't expect to see you here, but it's actually good timing. I didn't respond. just watched him. He scratched his neck, awkward. Terax didn't pan out. The funding fell through, and, well, things with Yasmin are a little complicated right now. I raised an eyebrow. He laughed, dry and sheepish. She's intense, huh? I mean, I knew that, but, anyway. I might be starting something new. Something bigger. I'm looking for partners. I felt my lip curl before I could stop it. You're asking me to invest? No, well, not yet, he said quickly, hands up. Just wanted to catch up. See where your head's at. You always had great instincts. I respected that about you. I took a slow breath. And then I smiled. A real, calm, serene smile. Thanks, Rory. But I don't fund people who ghost me anymore. His face shifted just a flicker. He looked embarrassed. Or maybe stunned that I didn't fall into the same pattern. I turned back to my conversation and didn't look at him again. After that night, I thought I might hear from Yasmin. Maybe she'd found out we'd crossed paths. Maybe he'd said something. But she stayed silent. And for the first time, her silence didn't sting. It felt like space. It felt like peace. I didn't expect revenge to come quietly. I used to think revenge had to be dramatic, public, explosive, cinematic. But that night, standing in that room filled with glassware and networking professionals, giving Rory nothing but a polite smile and a firm no, I felt something shift. It was the first time I really understood what people meant when they said living well is the best revenge. Not just surviving, not just scraping by with emotional bruises and a half-healed sense of self. But living fully. On your own terms. But it didn't stop there. Because life, as it turns out, has a way of circling back. And Yasmin and Rory weren't as far ahead of consequences as they thought. A few weeks after the mixer, I got an email from a woman named Melanie from a startup I'd worked with briefly on a consulting basis 2 years prior. She was now the operations manager at a green business accelerator in Berkeley, and she remembered I had once mentioned I'd invested in an early-stage sustainability logistics company. She wanted to know if I was still open to partnerships. I was cautious. I said I wasn't funding anything new personally but would be happy to consult. She looped me into a video call with their head of strategy. And there, in one of the pitch decks they shared for feedback, was a new startup proposal. It was Rory's idea. Again. Same basic concept, slightly rebranded name, different logo. But unmistakably his. He wasn't listed as the founder. Instead, he'd put someone else up front, some guy named Brent, but the IP and pitch language were identical to what Rory used to sell to me. I didn't say anything during the call, just listened, asked questions, and took notes. Afterward, I emailed Melanie privately and told her the history. No bitterness. No drama. Just the facts, that this was a recycled idea from a failed company. That I had personally funded the original version and watched it implode due to mismanagement and ghosting. That the person behind it, while not named, was very likely the same man, now hiding behind a proxy. She responded within the hour. Thank you for the heads up, she said. We'll be removing this proposal from our shortlist. I never heard about that startup again. But the real closure came from something smaller. A letter. Yasmin sent it 6 months after the wedding. Not an email. Not a voicemail. A handwritten letter, postmarked from a co-working space in Sacramento, apparently where she and Rory had moved after Tahoe. The envelope was thick. Cream-colored. Her handwriting was familiar, too neat, too curated, like she was trying to be someone she wasn't. Inside was a letter that I've only read once. She said she didn't know how to face me. That she didn't know how much hurt she had caused until it all started unraveling. She said Rory had changed after the wedding, or maybe had always been that way and she just didn't see it. She said he was controlling. Hot and cold. Dismissive. She said the startup failed again, that he blamed her, that he said I poisoned his opportunities. She said he spent her savings. That he left for someone else. a developer he met online. She said she was sorry. That she didn't know why she said what she said at the wedding, only that she wanted to feel powerful in a moment that scared her. That she thought if she could rewrite the story, make herself the winner, then maybe it wouldn't hurt so much to know she was standing in the ruins of something that had never been hers to begin with. There was no ask. No apology laced with manipulation. Just her shame. Her mess. Her confession. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. She made her choices. I made mine. I moved forward. The following spring, I used what was left of my savings, the money I didn't spend on her wedding or Rory's failed app, to do something I'd always wanted to do. I opened a boutique consulting firm. Just me at first. Focused on advising green startups with a female founder-first approach. I called it Second Wind Strategies. A nod to both sustainability and the idea that sometimes, you don't really come alive until the second chapter of your life. I took on my first 2 clients within 3 months. By the end of the year, I was profitable. And the cherry on top? One of the clients I advised landed a seed investment that Rory had once applied for and been rejected. I didn't rub it in. I didn't post about it. But I kept the award announcement on my bulletin board in my home office, a private trophy for a victory no one else needed to know about. As for Yasmin, I don't know where she is now. We haven't spoken since her letter. I've made peace with the idea that she may never be in my life again. And more importantly, that I can still love the version of her I once knew without letting her back in. That's the revenge I took. No shouting. No dragging. No scheming. Just rebuilding a life that no longer revolves around anyone who uses love as leverage. Just rising and never offering them a hand on the way down.